Commander David McClintock stands on the bridge of a weapon designed to be invisible, staring into a darkness that conceals the largest concentration of enemy steel ever assembled. It is October 1944 in the Philippine Sea, and the heavy silence of the Palawan Passage is a deception masking a desperate empire's final gamble for survival. Within hours, this submarine will achieve a victory so absolute that the ocean will demand the vessel's own existence as payment. The war in the Pacific has reached a terminal velocity, compressing years of strategic maneuvering into a single, decisive confrontation. For the United States Navy, the objective is the liberation of the Philippines, a massive amphibious assault on the island of Leyte that promises to sever the Empire of Japan from its resource colonies in the south. For the Japanese Imperial Navy, the equation is existential. If they lose the Philippines, they lose the oil that powers their ships and the rubber that tires their aircraft. The fuel lines running from the Dutch East Indies are the arteries of the empire, and the American invasion force is a knife poised to cut the jugular. In Tokyo, the Naval High Command has authorized a plan born of pure desperation known as Shogo 1, or Victory Operation 1. It is a strategy that discards the caution of the early war years in favor of a reckless, all-in gamble. The plan calls for stripping the defenses of the home islands and sending every available battleship, cruiser, and destroyer into the Philippine Sea. They are to converge on the American landing beaches at Leyte Gulf and annihilate the transport fleet. It is a suicide charge on a naval scale, a final sortie designed to inflict maximum damage before the inevitable collapse. At the center of this massive pincer movement is the Japanese Center Force, a collection of surface power that remains terrifying even in 1944. It includes 5 battleships, among them the Yamato and Musashi, the largest and most heavily armed warships ever built. Flanking these giants are 10 heavy cruisers and a swarm of destroyers. This armada is not hiding, it is steaming hard toward the American fleet, hoping to use the complex geography of the Philippine archipelago to mask its approach until it is too late for the Americans to react. To reach the invasion beaches, this massive fleet must navigate a series of treacherous waterways, the most dangerous of which is the Palawan Passage. This narrow strip of deep water runs along the western coast of Palawan Island. To the west lies a jagged nightmare of reefs, shoals, and islands known as the dangerous ground, an area so hazardous that navigational charts of the era often left it blank. To the east lies the hostile coast. The passage is a geographic funnel, a choke point where a fleet must form a single column to pass safely. Waiting inside this funnel, submerged in the warm, saline dark, is the USS Darter. She is a Gato-class submarine, hull number SS-227, launched from the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. She is 311 feet long, displacing nearly 2,400 tons when submerged. She is a machine built for endurance, capable of patrolling for 75 days and traveling 11,000 miles without refueling. Inside her pressure hull, 80 officers and enlisted men live in an environment defined by the smell of diesel oil, the humidity of the tropics, and the constant, low-frequency hum of ventilation fans. The Darter is not alone. She is operating in a coordinated wolf pack with another submarine, the USS Dace. Together, they form a picket line, a submerged tripwire positioned to detect any Japanese forces attempting to slip through the passage. The concept of the wolf pack, pioneered by the Germans in the Atlantic, has been adapted by the Americans with devastating efficiency. Darter and Dace move in a loose synchronization, their captains communicating via short-range radio and semaphore when surfaced, coordinating their search patterns to cover the maximum amount of ocean. On the night of October 22, 1944, the atmosphere aboard the Darter is tense but routine. The submarine is surfaced, running on her 4 diesel engines to charge the massive banks of batteries that power her submerged operations. The radar antenna, a technological marvel known as the SJ radar, rotates rhythmically atop the mast, sweeping the horizon with pulses of microwave energy. This radar is the great equalizer of the Pacific War, allowing American submarines to see through darkness, fog, and rain, detecting ships long before the human eye can spot a silhouette. Commander David McClintock is a meticulous officer, a man who understands the geometry of interception. He knows that if the Japanese fleet is coming, they will have to come through here. The Palawan Passage is the only route deep enough and wide enough to accommodate a formation of battleships moving at speed. He has positioned his ship at the southern entrance of the passage, acting as the doorman to the Battle of Leyte Gulf. At 16 minutes past midnight on October 23rd, the routine of the patrol shatters. The radar operator in the conning tower calls out a contact. It is not a single blip, the kind that might indicate a lonely freighter or a fishing boat. It is a solid paint, a massive return of energy that indicates something large. Then another blip appears, and another. Within seconds, the radar screen is cluttered with contacts. The green phosphor glow illuminates a formation of ships so vast that it takes a moment for the crew to comprehend what they are seeing. This is not a convoy. This is not a patrol. This is the main body of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Historian Samuel Eliot Morison, who chronicled the naval war from the decks of the ships themselves, noted that the detection of the center force by the Darter and Dace was one of the most critical intelligence coups of the entire war. Until this moment, the American commanders at Leyte were unsure of the Japanese location. The ocean is vast, and even a fleet of battleships can disappear in the squalls and islands of the Philippines. But the radar pulses from the Darter strip away the cloak of invisibility. McClintock realizes immediately that he is looking at the center force. The radar returns indicate heavy ships, battleships and cruisers, moving at high speed, roughly 16 knots. They are sailing in two parallel columns, a formation designed for night cruising in restricted waters. The distance is roughly 30,000 yards, well beyond visual range, but the electronic picture is undeniable. The captain faces a critical decision. His primary mission is reconnaissance. He must alert the fleet, but sending a radio message from a submarine is a dangerous act. To transmit, the Darter must remain on the surface, raising her antennas and broadcasting a signal that Japanese direction finders can triangulate. If he transmits, he gives away his position. The Japanese destroyers, the feared hunter-killers of the fleet, will peel off and hunt him down. But if he does not transmit, the American invasion force at Leyte will be blindsided. The transports, the soldiers on the beach, and the support carriers will be vulnerable to the massive guns of the Yamato. McClintock chooses the mission over his own safety. He orders the radio man to send a contact report. Urgent. Many ships, including 3 probable battleships, 08 to 28 north, 166 to 30 east course, 040 speed, 18. The message flashes across the ionosphere, picked up by receiving stations in Australia and Hawaii. It is relayed to Admiral Halsey, commanding the Third Fleet. The alarm is sounded. The element of surprise, which was the cornerstone of the Japanese Shogo plan, evaporates in the ether. But McClintock is not content to be a mere lookout. He is commanding a fleet submarine armed with 24 Mark 14 torpedoes. He has the enemy in front of him, and he has the cover of darkness. The Darter is not just a sensor, she is a predator. He signals the Dace. Let's go get them. The 2 submarines begin a high-speed surface run, an end-around maneuver designed to race ahead of the enemy column and position themselves for a submerged attack at dawn. The diesel engines roar at full power, driving the submarines at 20 knots. They are racing a fleet of battleships through a narrow channel in the middle of the night, relying on radar to keep them from crashing into the reefs that line the passage. The geography of the Palawan Passage now becomes a major player in the drama. To the west, the dangerous shoals are waiting. To the east, the Japanese destroyers are screening the fleet. The Darter and Dace are running a gauntlet sandwiched between the jagged coral and the enemy guns. As the pre-dawn light begins to bleed into the eastern sky, the Darter reaches her attack position. McClintock orders the ship to dive. The vents open, releasing the air from the ballast tanks, and the submarine slips beneath the surface. The roar of the diesels is replaced by the silent hum of the electric motors. The crew moves to battle stations. The torpedo men in the forward and aft rooms grease the tubes and check the firing circuits. Through the periscope, the sight is awe-inspiring. The Japanese fleet is approaching in a majestic, terrifying parade. The silhouettes of the heavy cruisers are distinct against the gray horizon. Leading the port column is a massive warship, her superstructure bristling with guns and antennas. It is the Atago. The Atago is a Takao-class heavy cruiser, displacing over 14,000 tons. She is fast, heavily armored, and powerfully armed with 10 8-inch guns. But more importantly, she is the flagship of Vice Admiral Takao. The entire command staff of the center force is aboard her. She is the brain of the Japanese fleet. McClintock maneuvers the darter with the precision of a surgeon. He is calculating the speed of the target, the range, and the angle on the bow. The mathematics of a torpedo attack are unforgiving. A small error in estimation can result in a miss or a shallow hit that does little damage. He needs to place his ship in exactly the right spot to fire a spread of torpedoes that the cruiser cannot evade. The water in the passage is deep, but the currents are unpredictable. The darter fights to maintain her trim. The sound of the approaching propellers grows louder, a rhythmic thumping that fills the hull. The sonar operator calls out the bearings. The Japanese ships are zigzagging, a defensive measure designed to throw off aim, but McClintock anticipates the turns. He is not aiming for a generic hit. He is aiming for the vitals. He wants to break the back of the flagship. As the Atago closes to within 1,000 yards, point-blank range in naval warfare, the tension in the conning tower is absolute. The executive officer stands by with the stopwatch. The firing key is ready. The darter is a tiny speck of steel compared to the leviathans thundering overhead, but she carries enough explosive power to change the course of history. The Japanese lookouts, renowned for their night vision and vigilance, fail to spot the feather of the periscope in the choppy water. The Atago steams on, straight and steady, unaware that she has been acquired, tracked, and targeted. The admiral on her bridge is looking at maps of Leyte Gulf, thinking about the battle to come tomorrow. He does not realize the battle is about to start right now, beneath his keel. McClintock gives the order. Fire 1. The submarine shudders as the first torpedo leaves the tube, propelled by compressed air. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. Fire 5. Fire 6. The darter unleashes her entire forward battery. 6 steam-powered torpedoes streak through the water, leaving white wakes that point like fingers of accusation toward the Japanese flagship. The time of flight is less than a minute. In those final seconds of silence, the strategic picture of the Pacific War hangs in the balance. The invisible hunter has played its hand. The choke point of the Palawan Passage has become a killing box. And the darter, having done everything right, waits for the sound of the explosion that will signal the decapitation of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The silence following the command fire is the loudest moment in submarine warfare. Inside the pressure hull of the USS Darter, the air is heavy with the smell of sweat and ozone. The crew stands frozen at their stations, counting the seconds in their heads. The stopwatch in the conning tower ticks. The torpedoes are running hot, straight, and normal, traveling at 46 knots toward the heavy cruiser Atago. At 5:32 a.m., the physics of the Pacific War shift violently. The first torpedo impacts the Atago on her starboard side near the forward magazine. The detonation is not merely a sound. It is a seismic event that travels through the water and hammers against the hull of the submarine like a physical blow. The warhead, packed with 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, tears through the cruiser's armor belt as if it were paper. Before the Japanese crew can even register the first hit, the second torpedo strikes. Then the third, then the fourth. The Atago is being disemboweled. The explosions rip open her fuel bunkers and magazines. A pillar of fire erupts from the ship, illuminating the pre-dawn darkness of the Palawan Passage with the intensity of a dying sun. The massive cruiser, displacing 14,000 tons, shudders and stops dead in the water. Her bow begins to dip. The fires are instantaneous and uncontrollable, fed by the volatile mixture of aviation fuel and ammunition. On the bridge of the Atago, Vice Admiral Takao Kurita, the commander of the entire Japanese center force, the man charged with saving the empire, is thrown to the deck. The nerve center of the Japanese fleet is shattered. The communications equipment is destroyed. The charts are burning. In a matter of seconds, the massive armada steaming toward Leyte has been decapitated. The fleet is still there, but the brain is gone. But Commander McClintock is not watching the fire. He is already moving to the next phase of the attack. He knows that a submarine that stays still after firing is a dead submarine. The Japanese destroyers, recovering from the initial shock, will be hunting him within minutes, yet he sees another target. Directly astern of the burning Atago is her sister ship, the heavy cruiser Takao. In the confusion of the attack, the Takao has held her course, silhouetted against the flames of the flagship. She is a perfect target. McClintock orders a hard turn. He swings the darter around to bring her stern torpedo tubes to bear. This is a maneuver of extreme aggression. Most captains would dive deep and evade after such a successful strike. McClintock stays at periscope depth. He is greedy for more tonnage. The geometry is calculated in seconds. The Darter shudders again as the 4 stern tubes are fired. The Takao, alerted by the destruction of the flagship, is beginning to maneuver, but she is too slow. 2 torpedoes slam into her starboard side. They blow the rudder off and shatter the propellers. They tear massive holes in the engineering spaces. The Takao does not explode like the Atago, but she is crippled. She loses power, listing heavily, drifting helplessly in the current. She is no longer a combatant. She is a smoking hulk. In less than 10 minutes, the USS Darter has neutralized 2 of the most powerful heavy cruisers in the Imperial Japanese Navy. Meanwhile, a few thousand yards away, the USS Dace chooses this moment to strike. Commander Bladen Claggett has been waiting, watching the chaos unfold. As the Japanese formation breaks apart in confusion, the heavy cruiser Maya crosses his sights. The Dace fires 4 torpedoes from her bow tubes. The results are apocalyptic. The Maya is hit in the chain locker, the number 1 gun turret, and the boiler room. The hits trigger a sympathetic detonation of her secondary magazines. The Maya essentially vaporizes. The ship is torn in half. She sinks in less than 8 minutes, taking nearly her entire crew down with her. The Palawan Passage has become a slaughterhouse. 3 heavy cruisers, the core of the Japanese cruiser division, are destroyed or crippled. The water is thick with oil, debris, and survivors. But for the crews of the Darter and Dace, the celebration is short-lived. The Japanese destroyers, the Kishinami, Naganami, and Asashimo, are now awake to the threat. They are fast, agile, and furious. They turn toward the likely positions of the invisible assailants, their sonar pinging the water, their depth charge racks primed. McClintock orders the Darter deep. Flood negative, down angle 20, rig for depth charge. The submarine angles sharply toward the bottom. The vents open and the Darter becomes heavy, sliding down into the thermal layers of the passage. The crew moves with silent efficiency. They secure loose gear. They switch off non-essential machinery to reduce noise. They wait. The first depth charges hit the water. They sound like clicks as the hydrostatic fuses arm, followed by the terrifying crack-whump of the explosion. The shockwaves hammer the hull. Light bulbs shatter. Paint flakes off the bulkheads. Dust rises from the deck plates, filling the air with a gritty haze. Inside the pressure hull, the psychological pressure is immense. The men are blind. They can only listen. They hear the screws of the destroyers passing overhead, a sound like a subway train roaring through the living room. They hear the splash of the charges entering the water. They count the seconds, waiting for the blast. The Darter is diving to 400 feet, testing the limits of her construction. The hull groans under the pressure of the sea and the violence of the explosives. But the Japanese destroyers are dropping their charges too shallow. They are angry, but they are inaccurate. They are bombing the water where the Darter was, not where she is. McClintock maneuvers the boat silently, creeping away from the datum point. He uses the noise of the sinking ships, the groaning of collapsing bulkheads, the hiss of escaping air, the secondary explosions, to mask the sound of his own vessel. While the Darter evades, a different kind of drama plays out on the surface. Vice Admiral Kurita, the commander of the center force, is treading water in the oil-slicked ocean. He has been forced to abandon the Atago. He is pulled from the sea by the destroyer Kishinami. He is wet, covered in fuel oil, and humiliated. He transfers his flag to the battleship Yamato, but the damage to his command structure is severe. Important communication codes have been lost. Staff officers have been killed. The psychological impact of losing his flagship before the main battle has even begun casts a pall over the entire operation. The Japanese fleet presses on, but they are disorganized. They have lost their eyes and ears. They are paranoid, zigzagging wildly, seeing periscopes in every wave. The ambush has achieved its strategic goal. It has disrupted the timetable and the cohesion of the enemy force. For the rest of the day, the Darter and Dace remain submerged, enduring a game of cat and mouse with the Japanese escorts. They are forced to stay deep, unable to surface to recharge their batteries or refresh their air. The atmosphere inside the boats becomes foul. The temperature rises as the hulls absorb the heat of the tropical water. Carbon dioxide levels climb, causing headaches and lethargy among the crew. But they are alive. They listen to the sounds of the dying cruisers breaking up on the bottom. It is a grim, metallic sound, the death rattle of great ships. As the sun sets on October 23rd, the Japanese destroyers finally break off their hunt. They have to rejoin the main fleet, which is racing toward the Sibuyan Sea. The ocean grows quiet. At 2200 hours, Commander McClintock orders the Darter to surface. The ballast tanks are blown. The submarine rises, breaking the surface into the cool night air. The hatch is thrown open, and the bridge crew scrambles up the ladder, gulping in the fresh oxygen. The scene that greets them is one of desolation. The Atago and Maya are gone. The ocean is empty of the enemy armada, save for the wreckage and the oil. But radar picks up a target. The crippled cruiser Takao is still afloat, guarded by 2 destroyers limping back toward Brunei. McClintock's mission is not over. He has sunk the flagship, but he wants the Takao too. He signals the Dace. Let's finish the job. The 2 submarines begin a surface pursuit. They are running low on torpedoes and fuel, and their crews are exhausted from 24 hours of combat and tension. But the adrenaline of victory is a powerful drug. They have tasted blood, and they are hungry for more. The Darter accelerates to flank speed, her diesel engines roaring. She is chasing the wounded cruiser through the treacherous, reef-strewn waters of the dangerous ground. The navigation team is working frantically to plot the course. The charts for this area are notoriously poor, filled with notations like position approximate and numerous shoals. In the heat of the chase, the focus narrows. The captain is looking at the radar blip of the Takao. The officer of the deck is watching the destroyers. The quartermaster is marking the plot. They are moving at 17 knots, rushing through the dark, trusting in their speed and their luck. They have just won one of the greatest submarine victories of the war. They have decapitated the enemy fleet. They are the kings of the Palawan Passage. They feel invincible. But invincibility is a dangerous illusion in the navigating of the Palawan Passage. The enemy is no longer the Japanese Navy. The enemy is the geography itself, and while the Japanese torpedoes missed, the coral reefs will not. The ambush was perfect. The escape was harrowing. The pursuit is aggressive. The Darter is steaming hard toward a destiny that has nothing to do with enemy fire. The decapitation strike has succeeded, but the cost of that success is about to present itself in the form of a coral head rising from the dark water, invisible to radar and deadly to steel. The battle is won. The tragedy is about to begin. Victory is a powerful intoxicant. It floods the brain with dopamine, suppresses fatigue, and creates a dangerous illusion of invincibility. On the night of October 24, 1944, the crew of the USS Darter is high on this specific drug. They have just accomplished the impossible. They have ambushed the main body of the Imperial Japanese fleet, sunk the flagship, and crippled a heavy cruiser. They have endured a depth charge barrage that rattled their teeth and shaken the paint off the bulkheads, and they have emerged unscathed. They believe they are the apex predators of the Palawan Passage. But as the clock ticks past midnight, ushering in the early hours of October 25th, the Darter is speeding toward a boundary where skill ceases to matter and geography takes over. The submarine is running on the surface at 17 knots. Her 4 diesel engines are thundering, driving the propellers at maximum revolutions. She is in a stern chase, pursuing the crippled Japanese cruiser Takao, which is limping away under the protection of 2 destroyers. Commander McClintock is determined to finish the kill. He knows the Takao is wounded. He knows she is vulnerable. If he can close the range, he can put her on the bottom alongside the Atago and the Maya. The chase is taking them into one of the most treacherous stretches of water on the planet. To the west of the Palawan Passage lies a vast, chaotic region known on the chart simply as dangerous ground. It is a labyrinth of coral reefs, submerged atolls, and shoals that rise vertically from the abyssal depths to within inches of the surface. In 1944, the charts for this area are notoriously unreliable. They are based on surveys from the 19th century, drawn by British and Spanish leadsmen who dropped weighted ropes to measure depth. They are filled with blank spaces and ominous warnings: position approximate, breakers reported, unsurveyed. Navigating this water in daylight at slow speed is risky. Doing it at night at 17 knots while fixated on a radar blip is a game of Russian roulette. McClintock and his navigation team are relying on their SJ radar to keep them safe. The radar is a marvel of technology, capable of spotting a periscope at 5 miles. But radar works by reflecting radio waves off solid, vertical objects, steel hulls, conning towers, islands. It is not designed to detect a coral reef that is awash, hiding just inches below the waves. A reef does not have a vertical profile. To the radar beam, calm water and a submerged shoal look terrifyingly similar. They both look like nothing. The Darter is racing north-northeast. The Dace is trailing a few miles behind on a parallel course. The night is dark, the moon obscured by the tropical overcast. The only light comes from the phosphorescence of the bow wave and the faint glow of the instrument panels in the conning tower. In the control room, the plot is being updated every minute. The quartermaster marks the estimated position. They believe they are in the deep channel, safely to the east of the Bombay Shoal. According to their calculations, they have a margin of safety. But currents in the Palawan Passage are notoriously fickle. They shift with the tide and the wind. Unknown to the crew, a strong westerly current has been pushing the Darter sideways for hours. They are not where they think they are. They are sliding, mile by mile, toward the jagged teeth of the dangerous ground. At 00:05 a.m., the radar operator reports the range to the target. The Takao is still out there, tantalizingly close. The adrenaline on the bridge is palpable. They are closing in for the final blow. Then the world ends. It does not end with an explosion. It does not end with the scream of a shell. It ends with a sound that is arguably worse to a sailor's ear, a horrific, grinding screech of metal tearing against stone. The impact is violent and instantaneous. A submarine moving at 17 knots possesses immense kinetic energy. When the Darter hits the reef, she does not stop immediately. She drives up onto it. The vessel shudders with the force of a train wreck. Men are thrown from their feet. Coffee cups, dividers, and binoculars become projectiles. The screeching noise is deafening, a continuous shriek of steel plating being gouged by coral. The submarine rides up the shelf of the reef, lifting bodily out of the water, then silence. The engines are still running, but the sensation of movement is gone. The rhythmic rolling of the ocean swell has vanished. The ship feels dead underfoot. It feels solid, like a building. On the bridge, McClintock grabs the railing to steady himself. He looks over the side. He expects to see the black water of the deep channel. Instead, in the darkness, he sees the white foam of breakers. He sees coral heads breaking the surface. The Darter has run hard aground on Bombay Shoal. The realization is a cold shock that displaces the heat of the chase. They are not just stuck, they are stranded. The momentum of the crash has driven the submarine high onto the reef. She is sitting exposed, her deck tilted, her propellers likely fouling the coral. "All stop! Back emergency!" the order is screamed down the voice tube. In the maneuvering room, the electricians throw the levers to reverse the electric motors. The propellers churn the water, biting into the sea, trying to pull the ship backward. The diesel engines roar, smoke pouring from the exhaust. The submarine vibrates, the hull shudders, but she does not move. The physics of the grounding are merciless. The Darter weighs 2,400 tons. She hit the reef at full speed. She has ridden up over the lip of the shoal and settled onto a flat table of coral. She is not floating, she is resting on a shelf. The water around her is barely deep enough to cover the keel. Inside the boat, the initial confusion turns to disciplined damage control. The collision alarm is sounding. Men rush to check the bilges. Is the hull breached? Is the battery well flooding? If the hull is torn open, they are in danger of sinking if they slide off. If the battery well is breached, the seawater will mix with the acid to create chlorine gas, turning the submarine into a gas chamber. Reports flood into the control room. The pressure hull is intact. The batteries are dry. The machinery is functional. The Darter has survived the crash physically intact. She is a tough ship built to withstand depth charges. The coral has stripped her bottom paint and gouged her outer skin, but the watertight integrity holds. But the navigational report is the killer. The navigator checks the position. They are miles off course. They are perched on top of Bombay Shoal, a desolate patch of coral in the middle of enemy waters. And the tide is going out. This is the cruelty of the timing. The Darter hit the reef near high tide. As the minutes tick by, the water level is dropping. The ocean is retreating, leaving the submarine heavier and harder on the rocks with every passing second. Gravity is welding them to the stone. The psychological shift for the crew is devastating. 5 minutes ago, they were the hunters, the masters of the sea, chasing a crippled prey. Now they are the cripple. They are a stationary target in a war zone controlled by the enemy. McClintock orders the radio room to contact the Dace. Have run aground, Bombay Shoal, stand by. Aboard the Dace, Commander Claggett receives the message with disbelief. He orders his own ship to stop and reverse course. He approaches the shoal cautiously. Through his periscope, he sees the silhouette of his sister ship. The sight is surreal. The Darter is sitting high out of the water, listing to port. She looks like a shipwreck, a monument to bad luck. She is surrounded by white water where the waves break over the reef. The Dace creeps closer, but Claggett knows he cannot get too close. If he runs aground trying to help, both submarines will be lost. He holds station in the deep water, watching, waiting. On the Darter, the desperate work of self-rescue begins. They are not dead yet. Submariners are trained to solve problems, and this is just a physics problem. They need to make the ship lighter or the water deeper. Since they cannot control the tide, they must control the weight. McClintock orders the blowing of all ballast tanks. High-pressure air screams into the tanks, forcing out the water. The idea is to maximize buoyancy. They run the engines astern again. The screws churn up a slurry of sand and coral dust. The ship vibrates, groans, and pivots slightly. But she does not slide free. They try sallying the ship. This is a maneuver usually reserved for smaller vessels stuck in mud. The entire crew, 80 men, gathers on the deck. At a signal from the captain, they run from the port side to the starboard side, back and forth, trying to rock the vessel. They are trying to break the suction of the coral to induce a roll that might help the engines break the grip. It is a frantic, almost comical scene. 80 men running sprints on the slanted deck of a stranded submarine in the middle of the night, while Japanese destroyers are lurking just over the horizon. But it is not funny. It is desperate. They are running for their lives. The ship does not budge. The coral of Bombay Shoal is not mud, it is rock. It has bitten deep into the steel keel. The Darter is held fast. As the night wears on, the realization settles in. They have tried power. They have tried buoyancy. They have tried weight distribution. Nothing is working. The tide continues to drop. The hull is now groaning under the strain of its own weight, unsupported by the water. Naval architecture dictates that a ship is designed to be supported evenly by the pressure of the sea. When a ship is grounded, the weight is concentrated on specific points of the keel. The structural frames begin to warp. The propeller shafts begin to bend out of alignment. Even if they could pull her off now, the Darter might be too damaged to dive. And then a new thought enters the minds of the officers. The sun is coming. In a few hours, dawn will break over the Palawan Passage. The Darter is sitting high and dry, a massive black silhouette against the white reef. She will be visible for miles. Japanese patrol planes will spot her instantly. The destroyers guarding the Takao will return. They are sitting ducks. The accident on Bombay Shoal has transformed the Darter from a warship into a liability. She is packed with classified technology, the SJ radar, the torpedo data computer, the code books, the IFF, identification friend or foe systems. If the Japanese board the ship, they will gain an intelligence windfall that could compromise the entire U.S. submarine fleet. McClintock looks at his watch. He looks at the dark water receding from the hull. He realizes that the battle against the Japanese was the easy part. The battle against the reef is lost. He has to make the call that no captain ever wants to make. He has to admit that his ship, the sword that struck the first blow of Leyte Gulf, is never going to swim again. The adrenaline of the victory has curdled into the cold sickness of defeat. The ocean has claimed the Darter, not with a depth charge, but with a piece of coral. And now, the only mission left is to ensure that the enemy doesn't get her. The struggle to save the ship is ending. The struggle to destroy her is about to begin. The darkest hour of the USS Darter's existence is not the moment of impact on Bombay Shoal, but the slow, agonizing realization that follows. As the adrenaline of the collision fades, replaced by the grim calculation of survival, the 80 men aboard are forced to confront a reality that defies every instinct of a sailor. Their ship has become a prison, and the ocean has become a wall. It is now the deep middle of the night on October 25, 1944. The tide, which was high when they struck the reef, has receded. The physics of the grounding have shifted from a dynamic event to a static, crushing weight. With the water level dropping, the Darter is no longer supported by buoyancy. She is resting almost entirely on her keel, 2,400 tons of steel pressing down onto the jagged coral. The hull groans. It is a continuous, low-frequency complaint of metal under stress. The frames are warping. The propeller shafts, usually aligned to the thousandth of an inch, are bending out of true. The submarine is settling, embedding herself into the architecture of the shoal. She is becoming part of the geology. Commander McClintock knows that he has one final window of opportunity before the dawn exposes them to the Japanese Navy. He has tried engine power. He has tried sallying the ship. Now he tries to alter the mass of the vessel itself. Lighten the ship, he orders. Dump everything. The crew transforms into a bucket brigade of desperation. They open the fuel manifolds. Thousands of gallons of diesel oil, the precious fluid that allowed them to patrol for months, are pumped into the sea. The smell of fuel becomes overpowering, a thick, oily miasma hanging over the reef. Next goes the fresh water, then the food provisions. Men haul crates of canned goods, sacks of flour, and sides of frozen beef up the ladders and heave them over the side. It is a surreal act of waste. In a war where logistics are everything, they are throwing tons of supplies into the dark water, hoping that a few thousand pounds less weight will make the difference. But the coral is greedy. As the ship gets lighter, she does not float free. She simply rides higher on the shelf. The wind and the swell continue to push her further onto the shoal. The Darter is ratchet-locked into position. For every inch she might gain, the sea pushes her 2 inches back. While the crew labors on the deck, the radar operator in the conning tower reports a new threat. The screen is showing contacts, Japanese destroyers. The Naganami and the Kishinami, the escorts of the cruiser Takao that the Darter had been chasing, have reversed course. They are sweeping the area, looking for the submarine that crippled their charge. They are angry, alert, and armed with 5-inch guns that can tear the Darter's pressure hull apart in seconds. The Darter is a stationary target. She cannot dive. She cannot maneuver. She cannot even bring her torpedo tubes to bear effectively because of the list. If the destroyers find her, it will not be a battle. It will be a massacre. McClintock orders the crew to prepare for surface combat, but he knows it is a hollow gesture. His deck gun is a 4-inch weapon against modern destroyers. His best defense is the darkness and the confusion of the reef waters. The destroyers close to within a few miles. Their searchlights sweep the horizon, beams of white light cutting through the humid air. The crew of the Darter freezes. They watch the lights play over the water, holding their breath. The beams pass over the shoal, missing the black silhouette of the submarine by degrees. The destroyers turn away, perhaps wary of running aground themselves in the poorly charted waters. They have survived the first pass, but the sun is coming. When dawn breaks, the searchlights will be unnecessary. The Darter will be a black scar on a white reef, visible from 10 miles away. At 0200 hours, McClintock confers with his officers. They look at the tide tables. They look at the inclinometer showing the ship listing 17 degrees to port. They look at the exhausted faces of the crew. The verdict is unanimous. The ship is lost. This decision triggers the most painful phase of the night, the destruction of the secrets. A fleet submarine like the Darter is not just a hull and engines. She is a repository of the most advanced technology the United States possesses. The SJ radar system is years ahead of anything the Japanese have fielded. The Torpedo Data Computer, TDC, the electromechanical brain that calculates firing solutions, is a classified masterpiece. The IFF, identification friend or foe transponders, the codebooks, the patrol logs, all of these are critical national secrets. If the Japanese board the wreck, they will gain an intelligence windfall that could compromise every American submarine in the Pacific. They could learn the frequencies of American radar. They could reverse engineer the fire control algorithms. Destroy all classified equipment, McClintock orders. The destruction is manual and violent. Officers take sledgehammers to the delicate faces of the radar consoles. They smash the glass, the vacuum tubes, and the circuit boards. They pour acid into the gears of the torpedo data computer. They burn the codebooks in metal trash cans on the deck, stirring the ashes to ensure nothing legible remains. It is a form of self-mutilation. These men have spent their careers caring for this equipment. They have polished it, calibrated it, and trusted their lives to it. Now they are tearing it apart with crowbars. The sound of breaking glass and crunching metal echoes through the steel tube, a dissonant funeral dirge for the ship's nervous system. Down in the torpedo rooms, the men face a different problem. They have live Mark 14 torpedoes in the tubes and on the racks. These cannot be left for the enemy. They arm the warheads, not to fire, but to explode in place if necessary. They rig demolition charges on the engines and the main induction valves. The Darter is being transformed from a weapon of war into a bomb. While the destruction continues inside, the USS Dace begins a maneuver of extreme courage on the outside. Commander Bladen Claggett has been holding station in the deep water, watching his sister ship struggle. He realizes that the Darter is not coming off the reef. He realizes that 80 men are about to be stranded in enemy waters. He decides to come in. The Dace creeps toward the edge of Bombay Shoal. Claggett is risking his own boat. The charts are useless here. He is navigating by sonar and by the seaman's eye, trying to get close enough to the Darter to effect a rescue without grounding himself. If the Dace hits the reef, there will be 2 stranded submarines and 160 men lost. The Dace maneuvers to within 50 yards of the reef edge. The water is shallow, the current swirling around her hull. It is as close as he dares to go. On the Darter, the order is given: abandon ship. This command is the psychological nadir of a sailor's life. It is an admission that the ocean has won. The men gather their personal effects, only what they can carry in their pockets. There are no duffel bags, no souvenirs. They leave behind photographs of wives, letters from children, Lucky Charms taped to bunks. They assemble on the tilted deck. The wind is picking up. The waves are breaking over the stern. The distance to the Dace is short, but the water between them is a churn of white foam and sharp coral. They launch the rubber rafts. It is a slow, precarious process. The rafts are tethered to lines ferrying men across the gap. The currents threaten to sweep the rafts out to sea or smash them against the coral heads. The transfer is a study in disciplined chaos. Men slide down the hull of the Darter, splashing into the warm, dark water, climbing into the bouncing rafts. They are pulled across to the Dace, where hands reach down to haul them onto the wet steel of the rescue boat. It takes hours. The sky to the east is beginning to lighten, turning from black to a deep, bruising purple. The sun is racing them. Commander McClintock is the last man to leave the Darter. He walks through the ship one final time. He checks the demolition charges. He ensures no one is left behind, no wounded men in the sick bay, no sleepers in the aft torpedo room. The interior of the ship is a wrecked, hollowed-out shell. The smashed equipment lies on the deck plates. The air smells of smoke from the burning codes and the ozone of destroyed electronics. It is a ghost ship, populated only by the memories of the victory they won just 24 hours ago. He climbs the ladder to the bridge. He looks at the SJ radar antenna, now smashed and useless. He looks at the periscope shears. He steps over the rail and slides down into the waiting raft. As he is pulled away toward the Dace, he looks back. The Darter looms large against the stars. She does not look defeated. She looks defiant, sitting high on her pedestal of coral. But she is dead. Her heart, the crew, has been transplanted. Once aboard the Dace, the relief of survival is instantly replaced by a new, grim obligation. They cannot simply sail away. The demolition charges inside the Darter are set on timers, but relying on timers is risky. If they fail, the ship sits there, a prize waiting to be claimed. The Darter must be destroyed. And since there are no enemy ships nearby to do it, the job falls to her sister. The Dace backs away into the deep water. Her torpedo tubes are loaded. The fire control party, men who were celebrating a victory yesterday, now input the coordinates of an American submarine into their targeting computer. It is a fratricidal calculation. The solution is simple. Range, 0. Speed, 0. Bearing, relative. The sun breaks the horizon. The light floods the Palawan Passage, illuminating the Darter in stark, tragic detail. She is gray, rusted, and motionless. Commander Claggett gives the order. Fire 1! The Dace shudders. A torpedo streaks toward the reef. The struggle to save the ship is over. The struggle to erase her has begun. The ocean, having trapped the vessel, now demands that she be broken into pieces before she can be forgotten. The sun rising over the Palawan Passage on October 25, 1944, illuminates a scene that violates every tenet of naval brotherhood. The USS Dace, a submarine that had fought alongside the Darter just 24 hours earlier, is now positioning herself as an executioner. Her torpedo tubes are flooded. Her fire control solution is locked. The target is not a Japanese battleship or a convoy freighter. It is the silhouette of her sister ship stranded high on the coral of Bombay Shoal. Commander Bladen Claggett of the Dace gives the order. Fire! A torpedo streaks away from the bow. It is a Mark 14, the workhorse of the fleet, carrying 600 pounds of high explosive. The crew of the Darter, crowded onto the deck and in the mess hall of the Dace, waits for the end of their ship. They expect a massive column of water, the cracking of the keel, and the final slide into the deep. But the Bombay Shoal has not finished its torment. The torpedo runs true, but the water is too shallow. The Darter is perched so high on the reef that her keel is barely submerged. The torpedo strikes the coral shelf just yards in front of the submarine. It detonates with a deafening roar, sending a geyser of white water and pulverized rock into the air. Shrapnel rakes the side of the Darter, punching holes in the ballast tanks and the fair water. But the pressure hull, the hardened steel tube designed to withstand the crushing weight of the ocean, remains intact. The Dace fires again and again. It is a surreal, frustrating bombardment. The reef acts as a natural armor belt. The torpedoes, designed to run at a depth of 10 or 15 feet to strike beneath the waterline of a ship, are hitting the wall of the shoal. They are blowing craters in the coral, but they are failing to break the back of the submarine. The Darter refuses to die. She sits there, battered, smoking from the internal demolition charges set by her own crew, surrounded by the white foam of friendly fire. She looks defiant, a steel fortress that has decided to become an island. On the bridge of the Dace, the mood is shifting from determination to anxiety. They are loitering in enemy waters in broad daylight. The smoke from the explosions is a beacon visible for 20 miles. Japanese aircraft could appear at any moment. Japanese destroyers, alerted by the noise, are almost certainly closing in. And the Dace is now critically vulnerable. She is carrying her own crew of 80 men plus the 81 survivors from the Darter. Every compartment is packed. Men are sitting on the torpedo racks, sleeping in the passageways, and standing shoulder to shoulder in the control room. The air scrubbers are overwhelmed. The carbon dioxide levels are rising. If the Dace has to dive and evade a depth charge attack, the oxygen will run out in half the normal time. The weight of the extra men throws off the trim calculations. The Dace is heavy, sluggish, and overcrowded. Commander Claggett realizes he cannot stay. He has expended his torpedoes on the reef. He has rescued the men. He cannot risk 161 lives to destroy a husk of steel that is already wrecked. He gives the order to clear the area. The Dace turns her stern to the shoal and accelerates toward the deep water. As they steam away, the crew of the Darter crowds the aft deck of the rescue boat for one last look. Their ship is still there. She is listing, scarred, and abandoned, but she is unmistakably whole. The radar antenna is smashed, the deck gun is spiked, and the interior is a burnt-out ruin of smashed glass and acid, but the shape of the submarine remains. It is a haunting image, a weapon of war transformed into a monument of bad luck. The Darter is now alone. For the next few days, she becomes a ghost ship in the truest sense. The tides wash over her deck. The tropical sun heats her black hull until it is too hot to touch. The seabirds of the Palawan Passage land on her periscope shears, but she does not remain unvisited. Japanese forces, alerted by the explosions or perhaps by the frantic radio traffic of the previous night, arrive at the shoal. A boarding party from a Japanese warship approaches the wreck. They climb the ladder to the bridge. They lower themselves into the conning tower. This is the nightmare scenario that Commander McClintock feared. The enemy is inside the wire. However, the destruction carried out by the American crew proves to have been thorough. The Japanese sailors find a scene of absolute devastation. The faces of the radar consoles are shattered. The torpedo data computer is a fused lump of metal. The codebooks are ash in a trash can. The demolition charges rigged to the main engines did not detonate the magazines, but they wrecked the diesels. The Japanese find nothing but the carcass of a machine. They strip a few souvenirs, perhaps a deck gun sight or a piece of piping, but the intelligence windfall has been denied. The Darter has kept her secrets even in death. Yet the existence of the wreck is an affront to the United States Navy. A U.S. submarine sitting high and dry in Japanese waters is a propaganda victory for Tokyo. It is a symbol of American vulnerability. The order comes down from the highest levels of the Pacific Fleet Command. The Darter must be erased. The job is given to the USS Nautilus. The Nautilus, SS-168, is a dinosaur. Commissioned in 1930, she is one of the V-boats, massive, slow, and heavily armed submarines built before the war. She is not a sleek hunter like the Darter. She is a behemoth, displacing nearly 3,000 tons on the surface. But she carries something that the modern boats do not: 2 massive 6-inch deck guns. On October 31, 1944, 6 days after the grounding, the Nautilus arrives at Bombay Shoal. The scene has not changed. The Darter is still there, rusting in the spray. The Japanese have departed, leaving the wreck to the elements. Commander George Sharp of the Nautilus brings his massive submarine to the surface. He does not need torpedoes, he needs artillery. He maneuvers his ship into a firing position, treating the engagement like a surface naval battle. The gun crews of the Nautilus swarm onto the deck. They unlimber the 6-inch guns, weapons usually found on light cruisers, not submarines. They load high explosive shells. Commence firing. The Nautilus opens up. The roar of the guns rolls across the water. This is not the stealthy, surgical strike of a torpedo. This is brute force. The shells scream toward the reef. The first shots fall short, kicking up plumes of water. The gunnery officer corrects the elevation. Up 50, right 2. The next volley finds the range. The shells strike the Darter's pressure hull. 6-inch high explosive rounds are designed to destroy destroyers and merchant ships. Against a stationary submarine, they are devastating. They punch through the outer skin and detonate against the inner pressure hull. The Darter shudders under the impact. Holes the size of dinner plates are blown in her flanks. The conning tower is riddled with shrapnel. The fairwater is torn away. The Nautilus fires 55 rounds of 6-inch ammunition. It is a violent, systematic execution. The Darter is being dismembered. The structural integrity of the boat collapses. The hull, already weakened by the grounding, begins to break apart. The bow separates from the stern section. The sail crumbles. Finally, satisfied that the Darter is no longer a ship but merely a pile of scrap metal, Commander Sharp orders a ceasefire. The Nautilus submerges, leaving the smoking ruin behind. The destruction of the USS Darter is complete. She has been torpedoed by her sister, boarded by her enemy, and shelled by her grandfather. She has absorbed more punishment and death than most ships absorb in a lifetime of combat. But even then, she does not disappear. The wreckage remains on the reef. For years after the war, the rusted spine of the Darter is visible to passing ships. She becomes a navigational hazard, a marker on the charts of the Palawan Passage. The ocean slowly claims her, storm by storm, tide by tide. The saga of the Darter ends not with a funeral, but with a dispersal. The crew, transported safely to Australia by the Dace, is broken up. They are sent to other submarines, carrying with them the strange survivor's guilt of men who lost their ship but didn't lose a single man. They are heroes without a platform. They sank a fleet flagship. They changed the course of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. But they have no hull to paint a victory star on. They have no battle flag to fly. The friendly fire phase of the story highlights the unsentimental pragmatism of war. The Navy destroyed its own vessel not out of malice, but out of necessity. It was a cold calculation. The technology inside the hull was worth more than the hull itself. The Darter was sacrificed to protect the fleet, but for the men who served on her, watching the Nautilus shell their home was a trauma distinct from combat. In battle, you fight to save your ship. At Bombay Shoal, they had to stand by and watch their own side kill it. It creates a complex emotional legacy. They are victorious, yet they are refugees. They are survivors, yet they feel a deep, nagging sense of loss for the machine that carried them. The Darter was a tool, and when the tool broke, it was discarded. But a submarine is more than a tool to its crew. It is a world. And watching that world being blown apart by American guns is a memory that stays with the survivors long after the war ends. As the Nautilus slips away and the smoke clears over the shoal, the Darter enters the final phase of her existence. She is no longer a commissioned warship of the United States Navy. She is debris. But in the silence of the reef, she remains a sentinel, a jagged reminder of the thin line between a historic victory and a navigational error. The ocean has taken her back, turning the high-tech predator into just another part of the coral reef, waiting for the rust to finish what the guns began. After the guns of the USS Nautilus fall silent on October 31st, 1944, a profound quiet returns to the Bombay Shoal. The violence of the past week, the screech of the grounding, the roar of the torpedoes from the Dace, and the thunder of the 6-inch shells has dissipated into the humid tropical air. The birds return to the reef. The tides resume their rhythmic cycle, washing over the jagged coral heads and the twisted steel of what was once the USS Darter. The submarine is destroyed, but she is not gone. The shelling has reduced her superstructure to a mangled skeleton and punched massive holes in her pressure hull, but the core of the ship remains stubbornly perched on the shelf. She is a blackened, rusted monument to the friction between human ambition and geological reality. For the remainder of the war, she serves not as a warship, but as an iron scarecrow, a navigational hazard marked on the charts of friend and foe alike. In the months that follow the abandonment, the wreck of the Darter undergoes a slow, natural dismantling that is far more thorough than anything high explosives could achieve. The Palawan Passage is a region of violent weather. Typhoons sweep through the channel, hammering the reef with waves that can crush concrete. The tropical sun beats down on the exposed metal, baking the paint until it flakes away and heating the interior to oven-like temperatures. The salt spray accelerates the corrosion, eating the iron atom by atom. Yet, reports from passing ships and aircraft indicate that the Darter remains visible for years. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, sailors navigating the treacherous waters of the dangerous ground would report seeing a dark, shark-like shape resting on the white water of the shoal. It became a ghost story of the South China Sea, a submarine that refused to sink, standing an eternal, lonely watch over the site of its greatest victory. For the crew of the Darter, the end of the war brings a complex and bittersweet resolution. They are repatriated to the United States, celebrated as part of the silent service that strangled the Japanese Empire. Commander David McClintock is awarded the Navy Cross for the brilliant ambush that sank the Atago. The crew receives citations. They are heroes, but they are heroes without a home. In the culture of the Navy, a sailor's identity is inextricably linked to his ship. Crews of famous vessels like the Enterprise or the Missouri have a physical touchstone, a deck they can walk on during reunions, a hull that is preserved in a museum. The crew of the Darter has a nothing. Their ship is a pile of rust on a reef in the Philippines. They are dispersed throughout the fleet. Some stay in the Navy, rising to command their own submarines. Others return to civilian life, becoming engineers, teachers, or salesmen. But they remain bound by the shared trauma of that single week in October. They are the men who won the battle and lost the boat. They carry the strange survivor's guilt of a crew that came home intact while their ship did not. Usually, when a submarine is lost, the crew is lost with it. The families receive a telegram, and the sailors go on eternal patrol. The Darter represents the inverse. The crew survived, but the ship was executed. This creates a unique psychological legacy. There are no widows, no orphans, no folded flags at Arlington. There is only the memory of the long, dark night on the reef and the sound of their own torpedoes hitting the hull. As the decades pass, the ocean finally finishes the job that the Nautilus started. The structural integrity of the wreck fails. The constant pounding of the surf breaks the keel. The bow section likely slides off the reef into the deep water of the channel. The stern section crumbles. By the time modern divers and explorers return to the site in the late 20th century, there is very little left. The Darter has been reclaimed. She has become part of the coral. You might find a scattering of battery cells, a piece of a diesel engine block, or a twisted section of piping encrusted with barnacles, but the recognizable shape of the submarine is gone. She has dissolved into the geography she struck. However, the strategic legacy of the Darter is permanent. Historians of the Battle of Leyte Gulf increasingly point to the ambush in the Palawan Passage as the pivotal moment of the entire engagement. By sinking the Atago and crippling the Takao, The Darter did more than just remove 2 heavy cruisers from the Japanese order of battle. She shattered the command and control of the center force. Vice Admiral Kurita, having been dunked in the ocean and forced to transfer his flag to the Yamato, was a shaken man. He had lost his communications staff. He had lost his confidence. Throughout the subsequent battle off Samar, Kurita's decisions were hesitant and confused. He failed to press his advantage against the vulnerable American escort carriers. He turned back when victory was arguably within his grasp. Many naval analysts argue that the psychological blow struck by the Darter in the pre-dawn darkness of October 23rd was the root cause of Kurita's hesitation 2 days later. The submarine didn't just sink a flagship. She rattled the mind of the enemy commander. The Darter punched above her weight in a way that few single ships ever have. She traded her own life for the safety of the invasion fleet at Leyte. This trade, a 2,400-ton submarine for a decisive strategic advantage, is a bargain that any admiral would make. But for the men who lived it, it was personal. In the years after the war, the Darter crew held reunions. They told the stories that old men tell of the heat in the boat, the taste of the coffee, the sound of the depth charges. But the story always circled back to the reef. They remembered the sickening crunch of the grounding. They remembered the sallying of the ship. And they remembered the sight of the dace firing into their flank. It is a story that defies the standard narrative of World War II. It is not a story of glorious combat or tragic sacrifice. It is a story of a mistake, a navigational error, a chart that was wrong, or a current that was too strong. It is a reminder that in war, friction is everywhere. You can do everything right. You can execute the perfect ambush and still be defeated by a piece of coral that has been growing in the dark for 1,000,000 years. The Darter is a ghost ship, not because she is haunted, but because she occupies a gray space in history. She is a winner that looks like a loser. She is a conqueror that ended up as wreckage. Today, the Palawan Passage is a busy shipping lane. Supertankers and container ships pass the coordinates of Bombay Shoal every day. Their GPS systems keep them safe from the reef that caught the Darter. The shoal is just a hazard on a digital screen, a patch of blue water to be avoided. But for those who know the history, the spot is sacred. It is the resting place of a warrior who fought until the ground literally rose up to stop her. The U.S. Navy has never commissioned another USS Darter. The name was retired with the ship, perhaps out of respect or perhaps out of a superstition that the name carries a double-edged luck. Brilliant success followed by abrupt disaster. The story ends where it began, in the silence of the ocean. The noise of the battle is long gone. The oil slick has dispersed. The steel has rusted away. But the lesson remains. The Darter teaches us that victory is fragile. It teaches us that the line between a hero and a shipwreck is measured in inches of water under the keel. And it teaches us that even the most advanced machine, crewed by the bravest men, is ultimately at the mercy of the map. The submarine that won the battle and was sunk by its own navy is gone. But in the annals of the silent service, she remains on patrol, a reminder that the greatest enemy is not the one with the guns, but the sea itself. The story of the USS Darter is one of the most singular narratives of World War II because it lacks the finality of death. In almost every other submarine story, the loss of the ship means the loss of the crew. The tragedy is human. But with the Darter, the tragedy is mechanical and symbolic. The crew stood on the deck of another ship and watched their home being murdered by their friends. This creates a strange emotional resonance. We are relieved that they survived, yet we mourn the ship as if it were a living thing. It speaks to the intense bond between a sailor and his vessel. The Darter was not just a collection of valves and steel, she was the shell that kept them alive in a hostile universe. To see her broken and abandoned on a reef feels like a betrayal, even if it was a necessity. The grounding on Bombay Shoal serves as a humbling coda to the brilliance of the ambush. It reminds us that hubris and geography are constant threats. McClintock and his crew were at the absolute top of their game, flushed with victory, chasing the enemy down, and in that moment of maximum confidence, they ran out of water. It is a uniquely American story, a mix of high-tech competence, aggressive risk-taking, and a pragmatic willingness to destroy your own creation to keep it from the enemy. The Darter died, but her mission lived. She cleared the way for Leyte. She broke the Japanese fleet. And then, having done her duty, she simply dissolved into the ocean, leaving behind 80 men to tell the tale of the submarine that disappeared after winning the war. If this deep dive into the hidden history of the Pacific War and the strange fate of the USS Darter meant something to you, we'd be honored to have you with us again. Until next time, stay curious and take good care.